You ever have one of those moments where life throws two lonely souls together in the most unlikely place like fate's, just sitting up there laughing, going, let's see what happens if we shake things up a bit? Well, let me back up a sec because that's exactly how my story begins with a church pew. A kid who didn't have a single soul left in this world, and a woman so hollowed out by grief, you'd swear the light had given up shining through her windows. That Sunday started like any other choir voices bouncing off the old pine beams, the smell of candle wax and hymnals mixing with the dust motes. Families everywhere you looked, mothers fussing over collars, fathers squeezing their kids' hands a little tighter, folks pretending they hadn't spent a week arguing about bills, or who forgot to take the trash out. And in the middle of all that noise and togetherness, there she sat alone in a pew meant for 8, clutching a battered Bible like it was the only thing holding her together. Her name used to mean something in this town. She was a woman who got up before sunrise to knead dough and fill Main Street with the smell of cinnamon rolls. Back when her bakery was the heart of things before that car crash took her husband and son and left her house as silent as a tomb. I didn't know any of that, not then. I was just a kid who'd run out of places to go, wearing hand-me-down clothes that barely fit, carrying nothing but a cracked cell phone and the ache of every door ever slammed in my face. I slipped in the back, tried to make myself invisible like always. But when I scanned the rows for a spot where nobody'd bother me, my eyes landed on Hera, little island of sadness in a sea of family warmth. And then the preacher said, "Let's all join hands in prayer." The whole church reached out, palms and fingers and arms looping together in a big messy circle of belonging. Except us. We just sat there, side by side, our loneliness practically echoing off the pews. That's when I did something I can't explain even now. I reached out, hesitantly, and wrapped my fingers around hers half, expecting her flinch, maybe even pull away, but she didn't. Not right away. She looked at me, really looked at me, and in that instant, it was like she saw not a stray kid, but someone just as lost as she was. Yeah, that happened. And I gotta tell you, sometimes all it takes is one touch to change everything. After that day, things started to shift. I'd show up every Sunday and sit beside her. We barely spoke at first, but the silence turned from awkward to comfortable, like the hush in a kitchen before the first loaf rises. She began saving a seat for me, glancing over her shoulder until I walked in the door, pretending not to care, but I saw the relief in her eyes. You know what I mean? People think you need grand gestures to start healing, but honestly, sometimes it's just about having somebody who expects you to show up. One morning, out of nowhere, she walked me down to the local school, a tiny brick building with maple leaves scattering across the sidewalk. We sat together in the principal's office, and when the secretary handed over the form, I watched her pause, just for a split second, before she wrote Guardian next to her name. She pressed the pen so hard the ink almost tore the paper. That was the first time in years anyone had claimed me, even on a stupid form. She bought me a shirt and a sweater from the thrift store, packed me a lunch like I was her own turkey on soft bread, 2 cookies wrapped in wax paper, the works. She made sure I got to school, made sure I came home, sat at the table with me, every night helping with homework, even though her hands were rough from years of kneading dough. Slowly, she coaxed the old bakery back to life. Together we scrubbed the windows, polished the counters, and fired up the oven. She showed me how to work flour between my palms, how to wait for yeast to rise, how to trust that sometimes what looks dead just needs a little patience and heat to come alive again. But nothing's ever that simple, is it? There were days when the past crashed back in, burning everything in its path. One afternoon I stayed out too late, hanging with the wrong crowd. She was furious, her voice sharp, her eyes shining with fear more than anger. We fought hard. I yelled that she wasn't my real mom. She snapped that I'd never understand what she'd lost. Words flew, doors slammed, and the whole house felt colder for it. Next morning, I burned a batch of rolls, filled the place with the bitter stink of failure. She stared at the blackened tray like it was a coffin and just broke down, sobbing for the son she'd buried, the laughter she couldn't get back. I stood there, torn up with guilt, too stubborn to say I was sorry. I accused her of loving ghosts more than she could ever love me. The truth was, I was scared she'd wake up one day and realize she'd made a mistake letting me in. That night was the quietest I'd ever known. She sat with her Bible, eyes unfocused, probably asking herself if she'd been stupid to believe she could start over. But then, in the middle of the darkness, I heard her voice. "You brought warmth back into this house." She didn't mean just the oven. She meant me. She crossed the room and hugged me, so tight it knocked the air out of my chest. And yeah, I cried too. Life picked up again. We reopened the bakery for real. Neighbors poked their heads in. The smell of fresh bread drifted down the block. The house stopped echoing with loss and started humming with laughter. I finished school, went to college, somehow wound up in med school, busting my tail to prove to everyone, including myself, that I belonged. She grew older, gracefully, the lines on her face more about wisdom than sorrow. Then came the twist I never saw coming. The day I was supposed to give the biggest talk of my career, auditorium packed, department chair on the line, me phone buzzed, her name flashing on the screen. I felt this wave of dread hit me, bone deep, like the bottom had dropped out of the world. I tried to shake it off, but the unease stuck. When she called again, and I still didn't answer, something inside snapped. I excused myself mid-presentation, left a room full of colleagues staring after me, and ran out, heart pounding, desperate, not caring who saw. The taxi ride home was a blur. I got there to find her slumped over at the kitchen table, her breath ragged, hands shaking as she fought for air. Years of being the healer, and in that moment, all I could do was count her breaths, hold her steady, remind her how to breathe, just like she'd once reminded me how to begin again. We rode in the ambulance together, her hand in mine, and I whispered, "Hold on, I'm here," over and over until the hospital lights washed everything out. Word got around quick-eyed, left the most important talk of my life. Some folks called me a coward, said I'd never bounce back. It stung, hearing that. The next day, she insisted on being wheeled into the very auditorium where I'd left everything hanging. She took the mic, voice trembling but sure, and told them everything about the accident, about years of loneliness, about a Sunday morning and a lost boy who took her hand and never let go. She called me her son, not by blood but by choice, by love, by stubborn, messy, undeniable grace. The whole room went silent then. Something broke loose. People wept, called their mothers, whispered promises not to let pride or busyness steal what mattered. I didn't get the promotion. That hurt, but you know what? It felt right. I realized success isn't always what you think it is. Sometimes it's the stories people tell about you, the lives you change just by sticking around, the empty seats you help fill. We came home, reopened the bakery for good. The neighbors came in droves, drawn by the scent of bread, but really craving the warmth that only comes from a place that's been broken and healed and made whole again. Nurses from the hospital stopped by, sometimes just to say thanks, sometimes to remember what really matters. And one Sunday, we went back to that church. The pew that had once been empty was full, her hand in mine, sunlight pouring through the stained glass, laughter and tears mixing together until you couldn't tell them apart. That's the thing about family. It's not blood. It's not titles. It's the hand that reaches for yours when everyone else turns away. The courage to begin again, even when you're scared out of your mind. The bell rang out above us, deep and strong. And I realized right then, in that moment, this was the life I'd been fighting for, the life she'd given me permission to have. So let me ask you, right here, right now, who's the person who changed everything for you? The one you drop everything to save, even if it cost you the world? Drop your thoughts below, argue about what's right and what's fair, tell your story, because in the end, that's how we keep each other going. If this hit you somewhere deep, go ahead and subscribe, and turn on the bell, because sometimes what we all need most is to know we're not alone.